Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vanished Chicagoland Stories, the podcast. I'm your host, Pete Costanis. Today's date is January 7th, 2022. This is episode 95, season 4. And today I will talk about three things. Number one will be the International Amphitheater in Chicago. Also, Father and Son Pizzeria, also from Chicago. And third and finally, I will talk about the Flying Turns roller coaster that was located in Riverview Park in Chicago. Isn't that funny? Okay, right now the program will go into a commercial break. And this program is brought to you by Mousetrap, a board game from Ideal Toys. And this commercial is from 1975. So sit back and enjoy, everybody. Thank you.
This is Mousetrap, a game in which building the trap is half the fun. You roll the dice, move your mice, build the trap. But could this thing really catch a mouse? Let's watch. Mousetrap! The Mousetrap game. It's from Ideal.
Okay, everyone, I am back. I hope you enjoyed that commercial for Mousetrap. I've had this game when I was growing up. I'll tell you a little bit of history of that. That was created in 1963, but it was a little different back then. And the one that most people remember was the one from 1975 in the mid-1970s, which I have, and it was revised. And I remember it was like you saw in these old commercials, not commercials, like old TV shows, like you had some contraptions, like to set a trap. Used to see those in like on those Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoons from Warner Brothers, something like that. And so the object of the game is you're trying to trap the mouse so you can collect all the cheese pieces, the pieces of cheese. There were about 6 of them. So that was a fun game, and it's still being made, but Ideal Toys went out of business, so Hasbro picked it up, and of course they're still around. And so that was one of my favorite games. I liked it, I really do. And like I said before, I remember the commercial very fondly. They used to show it on WGN Channel 9, of course, on WFLD TV Channel 32 in Chicago. And like during the afternoon, when I watched my favorite TV programs right after school. Excuse me. Okay. All right. Before I get started, I received a message from somebody, and they asked me, why don't you put like fancy music or like sound effects in your episodes? Well, I've thought about doing that, but I think that's a bit much for me to do. I like to treat my podcast episodes like in the old days, like an old-fashioned radio show, very quiet, sedate, not very fancy, but try to be clear. Sometimes I make mistakes, and I apologize for that, but nothing state of the art, or just to do this to gain attraction, because there was only one person that said that, and I responded, and then the person responded back and he says, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. Keep it that way. Yeah, please do." And I said, "All right, I intend to." So maybe down the road I will like tweak a few things, but I really don't. I'll just leave it as is. It'll be me speaking. And it's it feels very comforting. And in the old days of radio, before television, there were radio programs, and there was they did sound effects and all that. Like, for example, like with horses trotting, you hear clop, 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 clop. They take like cups and all that, and they would make noisemakers and all that. But not here, not my podcast. So it'd be clear and It'll be just me, being myself. Okay. All right. At the top of the show, I mentioned I would talk about three things. First off, I'm going to talk about the International Amphitheater in Chicago, and a lot of people still remember this place. They had a lot of venues, a lot of concerts, conventions, some types of shows. So I'm going to read off a few things. Believe it or not, I have never went there. Never. I've never been invited to attend at a event, but I knew what it was, and I remember the TV commercials. They used to show this arena, and it was an indoor arena, and it opened in 1934, located on 42nd Street, West 42nd Street, excuse me, and Halsted Street in the Canaryville neighborhood. And it was adjacent to the Union Stockyards. And the Union Stockyards, they closed in 1971, which that's a very interesting topic. Maybe I'll discuss that in a later podcast episode, because there's a lot of history in that place. You know, it was a big employer, big, large employer in Chicago at one time, and there were a lot of workers there, a lot of families. Their parents worked there, their grandparents, and it brought a lot of economy to the city. So, but now it's no longer there, so it's gone. Okay. So it opened in 1934, and the arena seated 9,000 people, and the sports teams that were held, believe it or not, in this arena was, I'm going to read off so you can, some of them were were very brief, and some are not. They're still playing. So we have the Chicago American Gears. That was a National Basketball League. It was from 1944 to 47. And they played at the International Amphitheater also. And there was another basketball team, the Chicago Packers. They played for 1 year. That was the NBA. Also, the Chicago Majors, another basketball team. That's from the American Basketball League. So each of those played one season. And believe it or not, the Chicago Bulls played one season there, which I don't know why. Usually, at the time they played at the Chicago Stadium, so there must have been a reason. Maybe it was being renovated. Maybe it was something happened. Something happened. I don't know. And then next was the Chicago Cougars. They were a hockey team. They played from 72 to 75, and also last was the Chicago Sting, and it was a soccer team from 1974 to 1988, but they only played one season in 1976. Okay. And then they also had the national conventions there. They had, let's see how many. They had 5 of them. They had two Republican and 3 Democrats. And let's see, that started in 1952. That was the Republican convention. That was for Dwight D. Eisenhower for president and Richard M. Nixon for vice president. And then believe it or not, the Democratic convention of the same year, they had it at the same place. And running for president was Adlai E. Stevenson and John J. Sparkman for vice president. Of course, they lost. Next, in 1956, they had the Democratic, and Adlai Stevenson ran again for president. And Estes Kefauver, I think that's how you spell his name, they lost because Eisenhower won again. Next was 1960. It was the Republican National Convention, and Richard M. Nixon ran for president, and Henry Cabot Lodge for vice president. Of course, they lost because John F. Kennedy won. and that was famous for their debate. And it happened in 1960. It was held at the studio at CBS WBM TV at the old location, not where they are now. That was at McClure Court, which is torn down. I believe it's gone. And the last one was the Democratic National Convention, and it was for Hubert H. Humphrey for president and Edward Muskie for vice president. And they lost, and Richard Nixon won. So, and also the Republican Convention in 1952, that was broadcast live on television for the first time. It was a political, and that was really something. It really was. And the 1968 one was very controversial and very scary because there was a lot of anti-war protests, and it was just nuts. Just like in 2020, but, it was crazy out there. But 2020 was worse to me. It was, that was scary. And I remember they had the protests at Grant Park, right across the street from the Conrad Hilton Hotel where my father worked. And my father was working at the time, but he didn't understand or what was going on. I think my mother explained, or like his workers did. So that was frightening. When my mother saw what going on in the news, and she was a little worried, but they were outside, so the hotel wasn't damaged or anything. Everything was fine. But Richard J. Daley was. Richard Daley was the mayor at the time, and he was upset and very angry and yelling. I remember seeing it on news footage, so that was interesting. That was that. Like I said before, that was very interesting. Also, at the Amphitheater, they had concerts by legendary singers. Elvis Presley performed there in 1957. The Beatles performed twice in September 5th, 1964. That was their famous year. They appeared on the Ed Sullivan in February. And a lot of people, I read a lot of comments from people then they attended it, and or their parents the Beatles, and they said it was a fun show. They put on. The fun thing about it is the Beatles mentioned this at the time that they were performing, and a lot of people can't hear the music because of the girls screaming, and that was the biggest pet peeve that the Beatles have. They want to, they want their music heard, and it didn't happen. So, and then they stopped touring around 1966, and they toured. Yeah, they toured at the internet. They performed at the International Theater, and a lot of people know that their last performance was at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. So they never toured anymore. But they did perform in 1970 from Let It Be, the documentary, and that's out on Netflix now. If you have that, and I haven't seen it yet, so I like to see it. Also, they had like college basketball games, religious gatherings, trade shows. They also had circuses. Ringling Brothers and Barnum Circus had their circuses there. That was fun. I remember seeing the commercials. I never attended a circus. I always wanted to do that, but they don't exist anymore because times have changed. So anyway, so the amphitheater closed. And it was torn down in 1999. I don't know what year it closed. So and now it's they tore it down, and now it's an Aramark uniform service plant. So that's good. It's not a vacant lot. So that's great. So because it was sold in 1983, and it was expensive to maintain it, and it didn't draw a lot of crowd because I think a lot of venues and concerts and events moved to Rosemont at the Rosemont Horizon, which is Allstate Arena, and other places, or like McCormick Place, or I think the Erie Crown Theater. So that's a shame. But people still remember. They loved that place. It was very, a lot of people had a lot of memories. So that's another vanished Chicagoland business went poof. Okay. Next thing coming up is father and son pizza. Now, I posted this 2 days ago. I found a menu on eBay. I've heard of this pizzeria. Well, it's on the north side, but I'm a south sider, so there are other pizza places that I still miss, like for example, Luigi's and Vito. It's across the street from Vito Nick's, which is still there, thank goodness. Father and son. I found a menu from the 1960s. What's interesting about that? It's I was reading it, and you compare the prices today, back then to today, and they had the old-fashioned phone numbers, the telephone exchanges, and this one was Albany 2-2620. So it's AL, like in caps, and I'll give you a little history about that. Okay. And the original Father Son restaurant, it opened its doors at, I got to read the address again, at 3025 West Diversey. And that's like on the corner of Diversey and Whipple in 1947. And it was, there weren't many pizza places at the time. And throughout the 50s, pizzerias pop up everywhere and become very popular, and it just took off. It really took off. So that's good. And so it got, there was so much demand of that place, so they moved to a larger location at 2475 North Milwaukee Avenue, and they're both in the Logan Square neighborhood. And then they opened a catering service in Northbrook. And so anyway, they closed about 3 years ago, the original place. And let's see. So it was in business for 72 years, and times have changed because Logan Square became very gentrified and it became very expensive to maintain, and they had no choice. And then in 1953, there was a man. His name was Marshall Bauer. He bought the business. And then he was the one who moved it to the Milwaukee Avenue location. And so believe it or not, the catering service is still there in Northbrook, but I'm sure they make the same pizza, so that's good. So if you want to have throw a party, they will do that for you. And the menu is still there, And so let's see. And I was reading the menu, which this was very interesting. And let's see. Of course, they delivered it, and let's see. I was reading the menu, and they had, of course, the typical toppings for pizza: sausage, mushroom, pepper, onions, anchovies, olive, or combo. And they also had shrimp pizza, which I didn't know. Also, they had the Italian dishes: spaghetti, mustacholi, or combined with ravioli. I love ravioli; it's so good. And side orders, salad, French fries, etc., etc. Oh, and desserts, they had spumoni and cannoli. Oh, I love that. My favorite Italian dessert is tiramisu. I love that. Anyway, I was reading more, and they had other items on the menu: chicken, ribs, frog legs. Oh boy. They also had seafood, shrimp, perch, halibut, sandwiches, hamburgers. So it was a variety of things. But I bet their pizza is the best. When I posted this menu on my Facebook page on Van Chicagoland, it just took off. People love it, and they still miss it to this day. And they said it was one of the best places to eat. It was one of the best pizzas. It probably was. I wish it was still there because I like to try it. I really would. And it's a shame. It really is. It really is a shame. Anyway, so the funny thing about this place, that and it's owned by Marcello's. Some people say Marcello's, but it's Italian. It's Marcello's. you know, and it was funny because they, according to the website of Marcello's, they did about 8,000 and 10,000 deliveries per week. That's a lot. That's a lot. I can't believe it's. I'm surprised they didn't like expand. Go into franchise. I guess not. So I'm glad they didn't. I'm really glad they didn't do that. So if you're in the Northbrook area, or if you have a party, give them a call at Marcello's, and they will make your father and son pizza. Okay. Third thing I will talk about now is the flying turns, and I'll go very briefly on that. The Flying Turns roller coaster, it was a wooden roller coaster, and it was there. It first built in 1933 at the Chicago World's Fair. Excuse me. And it was only there for a year. Then Riverview at the time was operating. That started in the early 1900s. They acquired it, and they brought it there. And a lot of people loved it. They did like that roller coaster. Of course, the Bob's is their favorite at Riverview. And a lot of people mentioned that and on my Facebook page and all other social media accounts. But the Flying Turns was interesting. It was a very interesting ride. And the ride was there until when Riverview closed in 1967. Now, this ride, the Flying Turns, is still around, and they're in other parks. There's one. It's at a amusement park. It's called Nobles Grove Amusement Park in, I can't pronounce this word, Ellisburg, Pennsylvania. Okay, and that's been there. It's still there, believe it or not, it's still there. And I'll give you a little history about that park in Pennsylvania. It's family owned. It's it's been open since 1926, and it is free admission. Nice, very nice. And it has had 60 rides. It had 3 wooden roller coasters, 3 steel ones, and a carousel, and a haunted house dark ride. Oh, that's scary for me. So, here it is. It's the name of the park, Knoebel. That's how you pronounce it. And I never knew about this amusement park. It sounds very interesting, and it's right near the capital of Pennsylvania, right near Harrisburg. And so this is all the roller coasters. So they had quite a few. Yeah, they had 6 of them, and let's see. There are a few that are operating, but some are closed. One was the high-speed thrill roller coaster. I'm sorry, high-speed thrill coaster, closed in 2008. It was the Jetstar, closed in 92. The Phoenix, still operating. Whirlwind, closed in 2004. Twister, is still there. Flying Turns, still operating. Cosmos Curves, still operating. Black Diamond, operating, and Impulse. So they also had 2 carousels, like merry-go-rounds. That's very familiar to the ones at Riverview Park. And the carousel, the one in Riverview Park, is in Six Flags in Atlanta, the original one. So if you're in Atlanta and you visit Six Flags, it's there. I would love to see that. I really would, because that's part of Chicago history. And they also had trains and all that, but I'm getting off subject because this place is in Pennsylvania. It's not Chicago. Okay, so the Flying Turns was people do remember it. I posted pictures of that on my Facebook page. Also, I have a Facebook page called Chicago's Lost Amusement Parks, and I have that. Also, you can see on a video that I made a couple years ago. You can see that, and so I like discussing, Riverview Park. They have so many rides, classic games, rides, Like I mentioned before, the Bobs, still well liked, still well remembered, and they all miss it. They really do. Okay. So that'll be all for today. I'm glad you can join me. Thank you for listening. And I discussed the International Amphitheater, Father and Son Pizza, and the Flying Turns roller coaster in Riverview Park. I will do another podcast episode probably this weekend, maybe. We'll see. And I have 5 more to go till the episode 100. I'll think about what I should do for that special occasion. I'll give it some thought. It should be a lot of fun. Okay. So this is Pete Costanas, episode 95, season 4 of Vanishing Chicagoland Stories, the podcast. And like I said before, thank you for listening. And here's Ray Rayner saying goodbye and bye-bye from me. And everyone have a good day. And so here is a little traveling music from Ray Rayner. So long, everybody.
We have to go. Bye, bye, bye.